Welcome back to another video on this channel. I don't really know what to call these type of random thought videos. That might just be what it's called, my random thoughts on certain specific things. I noticed something when I was kind of scrolling through Hulu today, and it kind of was something that I wanted to talk about because I don't quite know how I feel about it. So one of my favorite shows currently and for the last few years is It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I think that show is great. I love kind of the social commentary of it all. I love TV shows about characters that are unlikable. I think that's interesting. And I noticed when I was just looking through episodes on Hulu that there were two distinct episodes that were missing from the roster on Hulu. It was the Lethal Weapon 5 episode and the Lethal Weapon 6 episode. It kind of, at first, I didn't quite understand why they weren't on Hulu because they have all the other episodes. But then I realized, oh, those are the two episodes that utilize blackface. Both of those episodes have Mac in blackface because he's playing Danny Glover, essentially. That it kind of rubbed me the wrong way a little bit that they weren't on Hulu, because if you look at all the other episodes that are on Hulu, there's far worse stuff that has been on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. There's far worse. There was an episode where two 40-year-old grown men brutally beat up children. There was one of the characters statutory raped somebody. There's torture on the show. There's constant, implications that Dennis might be kind of like a rapist or murderer in some kind of fashion of something. Like, there's all these weird implications and like stuff that's implied and even stuff that we see on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia that makes these characters unlikable and shows how bad these people are. But it's just interesting to me that the two blackface episodes are the two episodes that were taken off, because if anything, both of those episodes kind of comment on the use of blackface. They're commenting on the fact that, yeah, this wasn't like, we probably shouldn't have did that. In Lethal Weapon, in the Lethal Weapon 5 episode, there's literally a scene where Dennis, Mac, and Frank are having a conversation about blackface, and they're talking about, when is it tasteful, when is it not, when is it, they're having a discussion about it. And they're showing the movie to kind of clear up a debate between them. And it kind of acknowledges, like, no one in that show, in that episode, really supports it. They never say that, like, oh, blackface, yay. If anything, they always just kind of go like, yeah, this probably wasn't a good idea. We probably shouldn't have did this. Like, there's no one in that episode that condones the use of blackface. And even in Lethal Weapon 6, that episode, there's characters that point out that, like, yeah, we probably shouldn't have used blackface. Again, like, they're constantly commenting on the fact that blackface is wrong, and they're opening up a discussion about it. So it's fascinating to me that the episodes that literally feature statutory rape and torture and all this other horrible things, they left the pilot of It's Always Sunny on Hulu, and the pilot features one of the main white characters using the N-word and profiling other black people in the series and talking about stereotypes and treating black people in a stereotypical way. They left that on Hulu, but they took off the two episodes that were kind of questioning the use of blackface. That seems kind of weird to me anyway. And I've noticed this with pretty much every streaming show, because I remember when I rewatched 30 Rock on Peacock, there were two episodes missing from that show on Peacock, and one of them, I don't know why the other one was taken off, but one of them had a character in blackface. And I don't remember that episode, but I can guarantee you that they probably weren't condoning the use of blackface in that episode. And I'm sure they were making fun of it, and I'm sure they were commenting on the fact that people still thinking blackface is okay is an absurd concept. Like, they're commenting on it. And 30 Rock also has so many other racist stereotypes, and they make fun of that stuff. Tracy Morgan is constantly making black jokes and just talking about stereotypes in that show, and Toofer is They make fun of Toofer on that show all the time, how he's he's black, but he sounds like a white guy. Blah, blah. There's so many other things on that show that you would think, like, if you're offended by the blackface, you'd be offended by everything else. And it's fascinating to me that these companies are just removing episodes of shows like this, and no one's really talking about them. No one's really like doing anything about them, which is interesting. And I remember a couple years ago, I think last year even, there was a whole discussion of, should movies like edit out some stuff, or should we just have like messages before the movie starts for like older movies and stuff, talking about, hey, this was made in a different time and all that stuff. And they've been kind of doing that more. Like there was a big controversy with Gone with the Wind, last year. And they've started adding messages on the back of Blu-rays and in front of movies, even saying that, like, hey, this was made 60 plus years ago. It has negative depictions, but instead of editing out, we want to keep it just for history's sake, and so we can move forward. And even on my Fantasia Blu-ray, there's a note on the back of the box that says this program includes negative depictions or mistreatment of people or cultures. Rather than remove this content, we want to acknowledge its harmful impact and spark conversation to create a more inclusive future. So they didn't edit anything out. They're totally acknowledging that, yeah, there's some stuff in here that probably isn't okay by today's standard, but we shouldn't really cut it out. One, because that's censoring art, and anyone who is against censoring art shouldn't be okay with that, but also because it's there for historical purposes. How can we move forward and progress without learning about all the bad stuff that happened in the past, without learning history? That's why we learn history. Imagine 5, 6, 7 years from now, when physical media has completely gone by the wayside, we can only find these type of shows on streaming services. Are they going to add these episodes back on, or are these episodes just going to remain hidden? I don't know. I think it's a little weird that they were taken off in the first place, especially a show like It's Always Sunny, because that entire show is social satire. Like it's mocking the actions of these characters, and it's pointing a lens at society in a lot of ways. So it's a little frustrating to me that a show like that would get that kind of treatment, because you are essentially censoring part of the show. You're removing episodes of the show that, by the way, are some of the best episodes, like the funniest episodes of the show. I think the whole blackface discussion is interesting, because I've been very open on our podcast about the fact that I don't really have much of a problem with it. I think that people kind of overreact in some circumstances to blackface. I think the simple act of using blackface isn't bad, especially if you have something to say about it, or if you're making a point or a statement. Obviously, people always point to the old minstrel shows and stuff like that. Yeah, that stuff's offensive, and I'm not okay with that stuff. But usually in a modern context, when people do blackface in any kind of way, it's to make a point. It's to make a statement. Like in Tropic Thunder, I know a couple years ago people tried to cancel Robert Downey Jr. for doing blackface, but that entire point of that movie was commenting on the fact that actors take things too far sometimes, and no one in that entire movie says oh yeah, that was a great idea. Everyone always in that movie, all the characters within that world say, this is a terrible idea. Why did you do this? This is offensive. Stop. They're commenting on it. They're poking fun at it. They're not condoning it. That's pretty much what most shows do when they do blackface in something. I guess context kind of doesn't matter anymore with things when it involves race and stuff. It doesn't really, it's just, oh, he's in blackface, he's racist, cancel him. That's not necessarily the case all the time. We can have a movie like White Chicks where it's two black guys in whiteface, and that's fine. And they're being stereotypical, white women. That movie doesn't really have much social commentary or much to say. It has a little bit. That's I don't see how people can look at that and say that that's not offensive. But then call something like Tropic Thunder or It's Always Sunny offensive for having characters in blackface, when both of those things have something to say, and White Chicks is just a goofy comedy. It's a little weird, and it's a little hypocritical, I think. And I'm in the mindset of actors are actors. They're playing characters and people that they are not. I think by saying, oh, we shouldn't, Robert Downey Jr. shouldn't do blackface because he's not a black person, is kind of like saying, okay, well, Keanu Reeves shouldn't play John Wick because he's not a badass assassin. To me, that just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. To me, these people are actors. They're meant to play other things. They're meant to put on prosthetics and play, you know, real life people or aliens or, you know, whatever. And I just look at it as, oh, they're in makeup. You know, if they're not doing it in like a stereotypical or offensive way, I don't really see the problem with it. You know, because if you look at the animated world, there's black people voicing white characters and white people voicing black characters. That happens. The animation world doesn't necessarily care all that much. Sometimes they do, but you know, you do have those circumstances where, you know, you'll get a Phil Lamar or somebody who's black and he'll come in and he'll voice a white character or something. He's not doing it in a stereotypical way. It's just he's a good actor. Let him play this character. Like, that's really what it should come down to. But we live in this weird, sensitive society of everything. And if I thought something was genuinely offensive, I would call it out for being genuinely offensive. And I do not think in the slightest that It's Always Sunny or Tropic Thunder or 30 Rock were being offensive in any way. 30 Rock has black characters on it. It's Always Sunny is a show that's commentating on things in society. Like it's having like a satirical look at all of this stuff. You know, Tropic Thunder's a movie that commentates on it. You know, and you also have a movie, an older movie, like The Watermelon Man, where you have a black actor in whiteface. And again, no one's offended by that. And that movie actually kind of has somewhat of a message a little bit. So that movie is also kind of having, like, it's talking about something a little bit. But no one's upset about that, probably because they haven't seen it, to be honest, because it's old. But like, we're so quick to cancel all these other things without actually thinking about the context towards them. And, you know, I think if Disney, because I know Disney owns part of Hulu or like a stock in Hulu or something. I don't know who's actually in charge of Hulu, but I think if, you know, Disney can put a message on the back of, you know, their movies, talking about, you know, the negative depictions of people throughout history and the fact that it's in the movie or whatever, why can't they do that on those episodes? What's stopping them from just saying on the episode, hey, this episode features some stuff that might offend people. If you're easily offended, or, you know, if you find blackface offensive or whatever, please don't watch this episode. Like, why can't we do that on these streaming services instead of just completely erasing them? Because now people who have never seen these shows are going to watch them for the first time, and they're not going to experience these episodes. They're not going to see these episodes unless they buy them physically. And I know the It's Always Sunny Blu-ray of, I think, season 6, which is the one with Lethal Weapon 5 on it, has that episode on it. So if you want the whole show, you can't even really watch the whole show unless you buy it physically. And I just think that's a little silly, especially in an age where physical media is not super popular anymore. It's all about the streaming services. You would think the streaming services would have everything all the time, but we can't even get that. And I think we really need to start going forward. We need to kind of start looking at a lot of this stuff a little bit differently and thinking about the context of a lot of this stuff. Because if we can't have an episode of a television show that is actively commenting on the use of blackface and questioning, you know, the idea of someone using blackface and, you know, condemning people for using blackface in a show, what are we doing? Like, if we can't even condemn the characters within the show for using blackface, like, we're not making anything anymore. We're not commentating on anything anymore. Why can't I put someone in blackface in a movie and then in that movie say, hey, that's bad, but then somehow I'd still get canceled just for the simple act of using blackface. But then, you know, someone like Dave Chappelle or Eddie Griffin, you know, was in blackface in one of the Deuce Bigelow movies, or he was in whiteface, actually, not blackface, because he's a black man. He was in whiteface. Or the Wayans brothers for being in whiteface. Like, we can't, that's not offensive. That's fine. Even though it's kind of the same thing. And in a lot of ways, whiteface is kind of more offensive, because usually when people do that, it's playing off of a stereotype of white people. And I can't think of anything in the last 15, 20 years where someone's done blackface and it's been anything other than like commentating on the fact that, like, yeah, this isn't okay. Other than maybe that movie Soul Man.
Congratulations, Mr. Watson.
Thank you, sir. I'll do my best.
Some people would do anything to get into Harvard.
It's gonna be great! These are the 80s, man! It's the Cosby decade!
For Mark Watson, all it took was a little soul.
I'd like you to meet my good friend, Kareem Abdul-Ali.
Soul Man. He didn't give up. He got down.
Right on.
Fuck that movie. But it's a little silly that we can't even talk about it anymore. We can't even like have a social commentary. We can't have a movie have some social commentary on that stuff anymore without it being removed or just completely erased from history. You're erasing history essentially, and it's important. And I know people don't care about movies and they don't care about film history unless it involves them specifically, but this is a part of cinema history, and this is a part of, you know, history in general. If you're not going to edit Fantasia but still acknowledge that it has negative depictions in it and acknowledge the fact that keeping them in there is important, why are we doing that with TV shows on Hulu or on Peacock or whatever? What is the difference? If movies can acknowledge it and have a message up front or whatever on the fucking box, why can't we do that on streaming? So thank you for watching this video and listening to me just talk about something that just kind of it just hit me kind of in an interesting way, and I wanted to talk about it. This video didn't really have a point. I just kind of wanted to point out some hypocrisies that I noticed today on Hulu and with other streaming services. I've known this is the thing that's happening now, and it's very strange and it's very bizarre, and I honestly don't get it. So if someone can explain it to me, that would be great. I just think it's weird, and I think that people are removing context out of things now just to try to make everything seem like the worst thing in the world. When, you know, It's Always Sunny has things in every episode that are far worse than a character wearing blackface, like, and no one's saying anything about those or doing anything about those. So I don't know. I just felt that was kind of a hypocritical kind of stance on the whole thing. And I think that you either keep all of it, you either put the whole show on Hulu, or you get rid of all of it and don't put it on, you know, instead of just piecemeal, you know, picking apart episodes and choosing what to put on. Like, no, either put the whole show on or don't. So please like and subscribe for more. I want to start kind of doing more of these kind of more personal videos outside of the podcast where I can just talk about whatever. We should be posting a review up for the Suicide Squad hopefully sometime this weekend if I can. So be on the lookout for that.